So the Zeros, we're in the 90s, mid 90s now. Zeros tour a lot then?
No, we didn't really. Well, we did those 2 European tours in '95 and '96, and as soon as we got back from the '96 tour, back to the U.S., I got a letter. Hey, will you guys come out in '97 and tour Spain again? And I thought, this is getting good. It's just getting better and better. And I called Robert. He says, yeah, let's do it. I called Baba. Yeah, let's do it. I called Javier. He goes, oh, I don't want to play in the Zeros anymore because it's like getting stuck in the past. I'm like, oh, this guy.
We'll write some new songs.
That was just an excuse. Because he goes out there with Bill Bartell in '97 in this band called Chariot, where they put out this record. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Because I guess in Javier's mind, he thought that, I'll reap all of the Zeros' efforts and I'll be the star. But it didn't work out that way because people wanted the Zeros, especially in Spain. Yeah, there's definitely hardcore fans there. And so then nothing happened. And then in 1999, I had moved back to San Diego. By then, I was living down here. Because I left San Francisco in July '97, and I moved down here. And by 1999, I get a call from Javier. It's like, oh, hey, this German label wants to put out a Zero CD, and I'm like thinking to myself, I thought he didn't want to get stuck in the past. What happened? He probably needed the money for the advance. And so I was like hemming and hawing, going, do I really want to get involved in this again? And my friends were like, oh, come on, do it. It might be the last thing you do with the Zeros. Blah, blah, blah. So, all right, let's get together. So I had just started working at Taylor Guitars. Baba was living in Scripps Ranch, and Robert was, I believe, in L.A., and Javier was living in L.A. And I said to Javier, well, let's do this in San Diego because I'm not going to quit my job. And so him and Robert came down here, and we rehearsed, and then we went to Richard Blitz's studio and recorded the CD. And at that time, I think Javier was drinking a lot, and he would just sleep his hangover in the control booth on the sofa while we were all doing the work. And Robert and I sort of took over in that sense to get things done. And we all got our parts done, and then it was Javier's turn to sing by himself. So he went in the studio on his own. And then I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, but apparently he was being antagonistic towards Richard Blitz, who I have a lot of respect for. He was a great producer and has a great ear for recording. And eventually Blitz told him, he says, you're not the first asshole I've ever dealt with in the studio, That's what I told him. And then he demanded the tapes, and he took off with the tapes. And then we had a gig at the Casbah, right after that incident, like the next night. And it was Robert who told me what happened, And then I'm trying to talk sense into Javier, in the pink room back there by the pool tables. And I said, dude, it's like, we got to finish this recording with Richard Blitz. He knows what kind of microphones he used. He knows what kind of EQs he set up. He knows what kind of effects, everything. Why take it to somebody else? And Javier says, well, the Rolling Stones do it all the time. And I'm thinking, oh, I see where you're coming from. You think you're tough? Well, yeah, but the Rolling Stones can afford that.
Yeah.
And they're not going to just take to whoever, So I was like, oh, man. And so, yeah, he took off with the tapes. And then got them remixed somewhere else. And then the CD came out. And, and in the process, Bomp was having their 25th anniversary celebration. They wanted all the bands that were ever on Bomp to do this, big concert. And Javier called me up, and he said, hey, man, this is at the end of 1999, right? He said, hey, Bomp wants the Zeros to play at this gig and blah, blah, blah. I said, that's all great and everything, Javier, but I just have a question. It's like, you and I have been friends for 20-some years and band members too. Why do you do what you do? And he hung up on me. And he didn't talk to me for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
All I was asking was, why do you do what you do?
Yeah.
You couldn't deal with it. And that was it, you know. And I said, okay, you know, I'm cool with it. And then I had already told my brother about all that madness that went on. And Victor, yeah. And so what happens? He goes to Germany with the band to promote the CD. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, what, really? It's like, I mean, I wouldn't do that to my brother, but whatever. And I got over it. I was like, okay, whatever. You deal with the craziness.
Yeah.
And so that's how that went on. And then, all this time went by, and eventually 207 comes around, and then Bill Bartell sends me an email and says, you got to go to Spain with the Zeros because Monster Records going to do like a live concert footage and somewhat of a documentary of the Zeros. You got to be there, whatever. And I'm like, why am I the one who has to fix the fuck ups? I didn't fuck anything up. And I said to him, I'm not really interested, Bill. He goes, no, come on, you got to do it, you know. I guess Bill had something to do with the organizing of that. And so then I said, okay, I'll tell you what. I said, I'll contact Javier, and depending on what our conversation ends up being, I'll make my choice. And I sent Javier an email. I never heard from him. Then Robert calls me up, and he says, oh, by the way, yeah, we are gonna go, just so you know, we're gonna go do the documentary, but Steve Rodriguez from the Dragons is gonna play. And I was like, and it was funny because I had suggested that to Bill Bartell at one point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We were just watching that video, actually.
I told him, I said, why don't you guys take Steve, man, you know? And then there you go.
And now you've replaced Steve in the Dragons.
The irony of ironies.
Yeah.
And then Bill was freaking out for a minute, and then he just got over it. And then that was it, you know. And then but here's what happened, and I'm pretty sure I'm on point here. They went out there promoting that tour as the original lineup. Okay.
With Steve Rodriguez.
With my name on the flyer. I got a lot of.
Oh, I see.
I got a lot of feedback.
But it was
through the social media that said, "Hey, it had all you guys' name under, and you weren't there."
Yeah.
And some people that I had made friends with, like in Barcelona and Madrid, they were like, "We were asking, where's Hector?"
Makes you look bad.
No, it didn't make me look bad. It made them look bad because they didn't deliver the full package.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had to explain, well, this is what happened. And so then they realized that they fucked up because, you know, not only did they fuck up to the crowd expecting the original lineup, but the club people running the place, the people that are promoters, everybody got affected, right? Mm. So, yeah, because then what happened was at the end of 2008, or in the beginning, somewhere in there, after that whole thing went by for a while, I got a call from Bob. I goes, Javier wants to put the band back together, but Robert and I told him that we won't do this unless you play. I'm thinking, okay, I'm pretty sure you guys got your ass chewed up and have to work, you know? And so then I said, okay. I said, that's fine, you know. I've got no animosity. I mean, if you guys want to do it, let's do it. And then, so yeah, Javier's going to call you, you know, blah, blah, blah. So, okay, whatever, whenever. And then finally I got a call from Javier. He says, oh yeah, you're the last person on my list that I, you know, because through AA you got to call and apologize to people. Oh. So it saved me for last.
Well, that could be a special deal. Maybe that's the one you're the one he had to apologize most to.
Yeah, probably. And then I said, it's all good, man. Whatever's in the past is in the past. Let's just get to work. End the story, right? And then Mara and I had kind of broken up by then. And then I think she was already involved with Mario. And so Javier, being Javier, Mr. Snidely Whiplash, thought he was going to get a kick out of it, saying, well, what do you think if we get Mario to manage the band, knowing that it might be... Yeah. And I said, I think that's a fucking great idea, man. So I just told him.
And Mario did the best.
Yeah, and it turned out great. And well, the nice thing about it was that Mario and I had a phone conversation like adults and said, hey, man, you know, let's just put everything on the table and be cool about everything. And he was like, yeah, let's do this. And everything turned out great. And we ended up becoming really, really close because of that. We didn't fuck around, man. And I was really, really mad at Javier for fucking everything up for Mario after those 2 years, because Mario was doing this amazing job every level of managing the band, publicity, money, you name it, everything. And then at the end of 2010, Mario had sent us email saying, hey, I'm booking the first quarter of 2011, and I got South by Southwest on the calendar, and we're going to, probably rake in 20 grand by April, and guarantees. And I'm like, this is amazing. And what does Javier do? Cancel everything. I'm moving to Austin. And Mario had never dealt with that side of Javier. So he was flipping out because it was affecting his Requiem booking, as it's going to make him look bad.
Yeah.
And I think Javier was doing it on purpose. Yeah, it was just horrible. That's your brother, man.
What is it? I don't know why.
It's just
just fear of success.
I don't know. A little bit, thank you. I don't know, man. Like I've told people, it's the most. It would be a psychiatrist's dream come true to sit down with Javier, pick his brain, man.
So we might as well let's jump ahead a little to the Netflix thing. So what was going on? There is was that because of Mario booking these gigs that you got? Someone saw you from Netflix and said, "Hey, let's do a movie, a movie on you."
Oh yeah, the movie situation.
Yeah, how'd that come about?
Well, apparently there was this fella named Abe Levi, who used to be a skateboard punk rap kid back in his early years, and his favorite band was the Zeros. And Abe had, by the time he approached us, had directed 2 independent films. And then his wife, who's called Silvertree, is a producer who worked for HBO and does miniseries for Netflix and stuff. And he contacted us and said, hey, I would love to do a movie of the Zeros, with the script and actors, and not a documentary, but a movie, like the Runaways movie. And we're like, okay, well, let's get together and talk some more. So he came down to San Diego, and we met downtown at a Mexican restaurant, and the 4 of us were there. We weren't a band at that moment anymore, but we were interested in this, and we all agreed to go ahead with the plan. He told us, he says, you guys will have a lot of control over this. It's like, and so we all met with him individually and collectively, and when it was my turn to be with him and talk, I told him right away, I said, you have to contractually lock in Javier somehow, because he has a tendency to take a shit on projects, and he could do this with this one. And he said to me, why would he do that? This is a movie about him and a band and his music. I said, well, you don't know him like I know him, man. And it's like, just please keep that in mind. Well, he didn't do it. So he writes the first draft, script. He sends it to us. We read it, and he told us, you have complete control of this. You can do revisions. I'll put them in the next draft. Okay, everybody did that. What's there to complain about?
How was the script?
Well, it was pretty close to, it was a little more, fictional, but still believable in the sense that, I think it opened up with Javier going to the San Diego Sports Arena to see a band, and then he runs into Guy Lopez, who was Robert's little brother who passed away. And then, they start talking about how they're going to see this band, and then Guy says, oh, my brother plays guitar, blah, 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 And so that was kind of like how it opened up. And then we, instead of rehearsing at the rehearsal space in the movie, we rehearsed in Robert's parents' house in a room. And then Robert's older sister, Shane, she has her boyfriend who's kind of more of a Leonard Skinner type of guy who's always trying to put us down because we're different, in the music thing. But so a little bit of tension,
embellishment, but
yeah, so there's, it wasn't bad, but there were some points where, like, I in my case, when you script focuses on me, it's like, my mom supposedly asked me like, oh, so you're going to start that Beatles band? And I'm like, X that shit out, because that wasn't the case. And so I rewrote something different, and he was cool with it. He changed a lot of stuff in there. And so a year and a half gone by, and I get a phone call from Abe Levi. He goes, hey, you're right. Javier doesn't want to do this anymore. I was mad, man. Dude, come on. You know what that movie would have done for everybody,
Yeah, because it did a lot for what?
The Germs.
The Germs and Joan Runaways. Did he do that?
I mean, it's a no-brainer, man, And then, so that's how that ended up. And then 3-4 years later, I get this email from Javier. Oh, these guys want to make a documentary. And I'm like, now what?
No.
And then I thought, is this some sort of like consolation prize to himself, realizing that he fucked up the first time around, that now he wants to do this, Because I always think that, And then I was really like, I don't want to have anything to do with anything, because this guy's just going to kill it anyway, so why bother? So I resisted for a long time to be part of it. And by then, Anthony and Mike, the guys doing the documentary, had already come to San Diego, interviewed family members, interviewed other people that were, like Tim Mays and the guys from the Loons and all that stuff, Mike Stacks, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, Peter Urban, who used to manage us and lives in Boston, sends me a message and goes, hey, man, you really got to think about being part of this. I mean, you're part of this. You're a big part of this. You got to be involved, And I thought, okay, it's Peter, and I respect Peter's opinion. And then I thought, okay. And then Jean Caffeine, who was another friend of mine who was part of the San Francisco scene too, she's like, hey, man, you really don't be uncooperative. Just give it a go, All right. So then I talked to Mike Weber and the producer, and then I talked to Anthony, the director, and they were really cool. And they flew out here, and they interviewed me at the store. And then that's when when Anthony said, I never understood why the Cereals didn't get all that attention and popularity like those other punk bands. And that's when I told him, well, guess why? I'm telling you now. And he goes, oh, I never thought of that. And then I brought it up. I said, make sure you got this guy under contract, because he could do this to you too. And he goes, don't worry, he already signed the film release and everything. I said, okay. I thought, okay, we're covered. He says, I'm not doing this for him. He said, I'm doing it for everybody.
Yeah.
I said, okay, I started to like these guys. They were definitely standing their ground. And then they had they'd already gone to LA and interviewed Mark Mothersbaugh and Jane Wheatland and all these other people from the punk scene in LA regarding the Zeros. And then they needed to go to San Francisco, and they didn't know anybody up there. And so I was like, I'll go up there and I'll help you guys out, I mean, why wouldn't I? I'm just documentary about my band, for crying out loud. So luckily, I talked, or rather graciously asked my girlfriend, who has a really big house, I said, can they stay at your place, And she goes, yeah, sure, And then she let us borrow her car, and then we all drove out to San Francisco and met up we got Penelope and Greg from the Avengers on the interview. We got Greg Langston, who was a drummer for No Alternative, on the interview. We got Kevin Chanel on the interview. And then the big one was Jello Biafra. And I had called him like a week ahead of time about doing the interview. And he was really hard to, convince at first. He goes, it's like I always make these documentaries and they never get finished. I was like, oh, man, don't jinx it, man.
Well, Javier just signed the release.
Yeah, I'm thinking, don't jinx it. And yeah, he was that. I mean, he was just being Jello. I mean, I love the guy. We've known each other for a long time and everything, but and finally goes, okay, all right, we'll do it, So, okay, cool. And that was the big one, that was the one we wanted. And then, we got Ron Greco from Crime too, the bass player. So yeah, so we go, spend the whole day chasing everybody. Oh, and Vale from Search and Destroy, the punk fanzine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was in it, and all these people. And then finally we get to Jello, and he was playing hard to get, but once we were there, he was just like a little kitty cat, he was all totally into it, talking about the band and everything. It was cool. So we got that done, and then a few months later, I was in Santa Barbara with Laura. We went to the Santa Barbara International Film Festival Awards because her friend is the president, this lady Linda, and she was honoring Michelle Yeoh, from Hidden Tiger, Crouching Dragon, or whatever it's called. Yeah, and so we got invited, and we go over there. And then the next day, we were going to drive back to San Diego from Santa Barbara, and then I get a call in the morning from Anthony. He goes, "Hey man, can you hang out in LA for the day, because Javier was supposed to meet us in LA to do a walkabout and talk about like the whiskey, and then go over to where the Starwood used to be in the Mask, and then but he totally bailed on us." And I'm like, "Oh my God!" I said, "All right, I'll see you down there." It's like, "Okay, let's go do this." Yeah, so that happened, but and then just at the end of last year, everything seemed to be coming together, and then I get a call from Mike Weber, and he said, "Man, I'm really pissed, because we thought we had everything on paper, including the music, the licensing for the music, when you guys signed that film release, but it turns out that there's got to be this licensing agreement signed too, and Javier doesn't want to sign it." And I'm like, oh my God, not again.
Why does he do this? It could help him so much.
Yeah, but
he's his own worst enemy.
I don't get it either. But so then, so we're like, and I said to Mike and Anthony in the phone, I said, "I don't care how the fuck we're gonna make it work, but we're gonna make it work, man, because this is bullshit. This is just not this time." I said, "No, we got to make it happen." So luckily they got a lawyer, and they got this lawyer to look into the whole contract with Bomp and how everything was laid out. And apparently those contracts are so old, and some of us were not even 18 when we signed them, that they really have no validity to a certain extent, and that there's definitely like loopholes there that you can actually use the music and stuff, because that was the number one thing.
You gotta have the music.
Anthony was like, "Dude, we gotta have these songs." Yeah. And I said, "Why don't we do this? Why don't we, instead of having the Zeros recordings, have like the Muffs Beat Your Heart Out play, and have Sator's Black and White play, and it'd be kind of cool in a way too, to show that these bands were like influenced and appreciative of the band, But no, so now it's going to be with the actual recordings. So, and Anthony's flying to England pretty soon, because that's where the editor lives, and they're going to start doing.
When do you think it's going to be released?
I'm hoping by the end of the year. It's going on 3.5 years now.
Yeah. You guys showed during a 077
the video.
You showed the video at the Casbah.
Yeah, the trailer. Really.
The trailer. Yeah. Wow. It looks like a real documentary.
Oh no. Anthony's done a lot of documentaries in the past, and he's gotten awards for them and stuff. And no, he's seasoned. For sure.
And it was also good to see Baba there. You. He was there.
Well, at the Casbah, we wanted him to get up and sit and play maybe the last song, but then he left.
Yeah, I guess the story was he had a time limit or something.
He probably didn't want to get scolded by his boss.
It's just funny because do you ever think there could be a reunion?
Well, I for one am never against it, and I think Robert would do it too. And it's just Javier who's the negative force in this whole situation.
Because I've talked to Letty about it, and Victor and everybody. Yeah, they're all for it. Everybody in playing the other parts in the other bands. They're saying, I'd love to see the reunion.
Yeah, but
their job's at stake.
I know, right? But
they're all for it.
Yeah.
This tears my heart apart, because I've known Javier since for 30 years now.
Yeah,
And I just want to see you all together.
Well, it's so easy to do, right? So why complicate matters? That's the question. Why? I've never been. I've always been open to do whatever with the band, regardless of who's going to do it, And
of course, the fans,
of course, the original lineup would be the best, and that's why every time I've always been like, okay, let's do it. No problem. I'm not going to take it personal, and but the big question is like, what's the problem here, Javier? What's bothering you about it? What's the big deal? You got to get to the root of that behavior. It's crazy, to be that way. And it's like I tell people, some people shoot themselves in the foot, you shoot themselves in the dick, It's like, really, it must hurt. But anyway, so I don't know, that, but that's a big part of it. It has to be
a mental thing or something. I just don't.
Definitely, it's a big part of the Zeros history. I always tell people it's like a roller coaster. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up. And the thing that I came to notice was that the more attention the Zeros get, the worse he gets. It's almost like a catch-22. It's really weird.
Yeah, I think it's a fear of success.
Could be, but
because look what happened to Kurt Cobain. I mean, he wanted to be successful, and they did through hard work and stuff like that, and then look what happened.
But I don't know. I mean, ultimately, I'll write my book. I gotta wait for people to die so I don't get sued. Though. I'll call it A Zero to the Left. How's that? Huh? Good title, huh? I got it all figured out.
So, I want to ask some random stuff.
Sure.
Because I got all night, but...
No, that's cool. Okay. No rush on my part. I mean, you kick me on when you want.
We already, we got the reunion, talked about the Netflix thing and everything, and trying to get back together, Starstruck. What was the first song you ever wrote?
A song called Nothing, for the Zeros. And, when I started playing that band and Javier had all these songs, they're all great songs, and I was like, I want to do that too, And so I wrote a song called Nothing about nothing to do, going to school, sat in my room, but total like rebel kid complaints, punk style, and then Robert was, coming up with Sneaking Out and Shannon Said and Beat Your Heart Out and stuff. So, and it's on the Mask. There's a 3 CD set of Live at the Mask, and I think that song's on there.
Okay.
It's on there. Yeah, the Zeros and Nothing. It's on that one. And it was pretty basic, pretty simple. And then after that, I wrote, I think, Left to Right. And then I wrote.
Was this Beatles influenced all of this stuff, or
no? It was more the punk scene was influencing me at that point. Yeah, totally. And then Left to Right is a fast song. Goes da 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 da. Everything around me seems to go left to right, right to left. Kind of fast. Dill's kind of more of a Dill's influence, really. And then They Say That Everything's Alright. They Say That Everything's Alright.
Yeah.
That was
a single too, right?
Yeah, that was the last single we put out in '80. Was Get Nowhere Fast on the A side and They Say on the B side. And that song was really influenced by a cross section of the Clash and the Avengers. Because I really like the Clash and their sort of protest songs like Why Riot and I'm So Bored with the USA, And then the Avengers songs like The American and Me and I Am the One, We Are the One, and Corpus Christi. They're just very like well thought out songs that make you think. You know, like, So what They Say was basically me complaining about politicians telling you all these things that they're a bunch of lies in the end, which is pretty contemporary. I mean, it stands.
What comes around goes around, comes around.
Yeah, they say that everything's all right, but we all know it's just a lie. Take a look around. You ask the people what they see, and for sure they tell you that this is not the way that it should be. So
So there's a story that you played "Beat Your Heart Out" 8 times in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah.
Were you there for that? What was the story behind
that? Situation was when we did 1995's tour of Spain and Sweden. In Sweden, Bill Bartell was connected with Mudhoney. And Mark Arm was in Madrid for our show at El Sol. And he actually got up and sang Wimp with us.
Oh, cool.
And then Bill hooked us up with Mudhoney because they were doing Lollapalooza tour or something like that.
Wow.
And so we got to get on that and play the smaller stages on those. And so I was in San Francisco. I flew down to rehearse. We ended up driving to LA to rehearse. And then we were supposed to meet up at 12. And for some reason, Javier or Baba changed it to 3 o'clock. And they didn't tell me about the change. And so I'm sitting there in front of the rehearsal room going, what the fuck's everybody? And then finally they showed up. And then we get together. My brother, I decided to take my brother as a roadie so he could have an experience. So him and I were there. And then Javier and Baba show up. Robert was late, really late. And so he wasn't there. And then I was going to use a bass amplifier that they had there, but it didn't have the amp head to the speaker cable. So I said to Slim, who was a drummer for Rank and File and then played with Robert years later in Elbez, I said to him, hey man, do you have a cable I can borrow to hook up the bass amp, you know? And then Javier goes, oh, I got one. And I said, oh, okay, cool. And he goes, but you can't use it.
Oh.
And I was like, this motherfucker. And so I said, okay, here we go. So to save an embarrassing moment for him, I walked up to him, got really close up to his ear, and I said, let's cut the bullshit and let's get to work. And he jumped back like in one of those bad kung fu movies, like a grasshopper. He jumped backwards, like, I swear to God, from the middle of the room to the wall. Wham! And as soon as he lands, he goes, you're the asshole, to me. And I was standing there going, wow, man, that's crazy. And I said to Victor, let's get out of here. Let's go. This is stupid. You know, we're like in our mid-30s, man, you know, and this guy's still being stupid. I said, no, I'm out of here. I don't give a shit about the tour, whatever. This is not going to happen here. And so walking away, and it's always been good cop, bad cop with Bob and Javier. Then Bob was running behind me. He goes, where are you going? What are you doing? What are you going? What are you doing? I said, dude, it's like, how old are we, man? It's like, what is this bullshit? And then Bob goes, well, just go talk to him. And it's like, and another thing, I said, why does everybody else have to go talk to him when he's the one causing problems here? It's just nuts, dude. I'm out of here. I'll see you later. And we left. And then they got Kevin to play that tour. And so then they go play at the Palace, and Bill Bartell obviously has a lot of responsibility towards Mudhoney for getting the connection for the Lollapalooza tour. And when he sees that Kevin's playing bass, he fucking got really mad. Because Robert told me, he says, he couldn't believe that you weren't there. He says, so he started getting on Javier about it, and Javier, his way of dealing, he got super drunk. And so he got really drunk. They had to practically carry him out of the Palace, right? And they were supposed to drive first thing in the morning to San Francisco, right? Kevin, Baba, and Javier. And they're playing at the Fillmore with Mudhoney. And Javier said that he would fly up there and meet them. So they dropped him off, and they drove up. And that was the very day that I was flying back from San Diego to San Francisco. And I remember I got home. My answering service had 3-4 messages from Baba. And it said, get your guitar and come down to the Fillmore as soon as you can. And I'm like, what's going on? What's going on here? You know? So I get down there. I get in. And I just missed the set that they played. He goes, did you see what happened? You see what happened? He says to me. I said, no, Baba, I don't know what happened. No, and Robert couldn't play that gig because he was doing Elbez that day somewhere else. So it was just Baba and Kevin and Mark Arm on stage. And so I said, no, what happened? You know? And then he goes, well, we played Beat Your Heart Out like 8 times in a row, and like we did it in different styles.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
And I said, well, where's Javier? Oh, he didn't show up. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? You're playing the Fillmore with Mudhoney and you're not showing up, dude? Come on. Yeah, so that's why they did it 8 times like that.
Okay, wow.
Not because they were trying to be funny, because they were in an emergency situation.
Oh, boy.
And it became this thing like, oh, it's so cool, but the reality is a whole other thing. But yeah, so yeah, it was just another mess up.
I had no idea Bill Bartell had such a...
We owe Bill Bartell our left and right nuts, because he did a lot for us, believe me.
Wow.
He did a lot for us. And will be grateful to him because, yeah, he got us connected with the European tours through Munster Records and Spain and what have you, and Sweden, and then he got us, the connection with Mudhoney. He was always helping us out.
Have you seen that documentary about him?
No, I want to.
Me too.
I want to. I think Robert is interviewed in that, but I'm not sure. Huh. But yeah, and then he passed away in 2013, right? Yeah. And then they had a memorial at Cafe Nella in L.A. And I remember I contacted Bob and Robert. Robert was in Seattle, I think, living in Seattle. But I contacted Robert and Javier. I sent them text. I said, "Hey man, you guys want to go up there? I'm going to go up there, and pay my respects." Crickets, man, nothing. And I thought, dude, really? This guy did so much for us, and that's it. And good night. Oh man, it's disappointing. But so yeah, I went up there, and then there's Susie Secret, right? She was the woman that organized the tours in Italy for us in 2010, who was really close to Bill. I mean, she flies all the way from Rome, right? Come on. Anyway, so yeah, I was like, that was disappointing for me, man, because yeah, the guy did a lot for us.